focus. Ideate, innovate, enable.
The India Risk Management Awards evoked a tremendous response from over 1,000 plus corporations. This was possible because of a specially created microsite for the India Risk Management Awards by CNBC-TV18. Here, large corporates, medium, small-medium enterprises and public sector units participated in the exercise by sending in their entries. To ensure that this whole exercise of picking the organization with the best risk management practices in the country was done scientifically and impartially, CNBC-TV18 roped in the country's foremost consulting firm KPMG as its knowledge partner. KPMG used this basic data gathered from CNBC-TV18's microsite and through its able staff across the country gathered first-hand information from the participating organizations. The eminent jury of the India Risk Management Awards met at the Trident Hotel in Mumbai on 6th Feb 2016. They had a tough task at hand to pick the winners from various categories. The 5-member jury panel came from telecom, infra, IT, financial and the manufacturing ecosystem. They are Akhil Gupta, Vice Chairman Bharti Enterprises and Executive Chairman Bharti Infratel Limited. R. Shankar Raman, Whole-Time Director and CFO L&T. Suresh Senapati, former CFO Wipro. Rui Bastos, Group Head of Audit and Risk Management RIL. And Sandeep Parekh, Founder FinSec Law Advisors. KPMG handed out to them the list of nominations in each category. Each of the finalists was scrutinized in every possible way. For KPMG, it was a session of answering tough questions from the best in the field. The jury looked at 3 major parameters before choosing the winner, which were: how does the nominee embrace the risk as an opportunity, whether it ensures the risk, and does it sometimes ignore the risk because it would like to address all risks, but sometimes as a part of a deliberate strategy it will have to assume some risks and therefore ignore it. Well, the countdown has begun for these reputable names that will contest for the prestigious trophy as they wait for the ultimate recognition for building the most robust risk management system for their organization in our country.
Hello and welcome to this special discussion where we have the jurors of CNBC TV18's Risk Management Awards. The jury round was chaired by Mr. Akhil Gupta, and we also had Mr. Senapati, Sandeep Parekh, Mr. R. Shankar Raman of L&T, and Mrityunjay Kapoor of KPMG, KPMG being the knowledge partner for this jury round. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me in this discussion. It was very important to get your views on board because my understanding is risk management is an evolving concern in corporate India, and your observations in the jury round as well as after the jury round would go a long way in educating corporate India on the importance of risk management. Mr. Gupta, let me start with you. What were you looking for? Because this is an emerging category and it's a disparate number of companies you judged.
Yeah, it is, I wouldn't say it's an evolving category because the fact is risk management has been the bedrock of every good company ever since the business started in this universe. But it's a little less understood one. And especially in terms of this as a mainstay function, it is being recognized now because I guess the risks have increased. The understanding how do you manage them, how do you forecast your risk, and what do you do to mitigate, how do you score it, is coming to the fore. And I think it was a very enriching and very good discussion at the jury because for different industries, different categories, we were able to have a look at what the companies are or should be looking at.
What would you say, what would your message be to, India Inc. in terms of what board members or independent board members should be alive to, given your experience in running a huge, being part of a huge conglomerate and also having worked outside India?
Well, my message based on the experience is that risk management normally remains like a boardroom discussion. Most of the companies don't really seriously give it the thought they should. It's all about your internal controls. It's all about seeing and saying what could happen to me and therefore what can I be prepared for. And my message really would be this is an aspect which all managements, all boards need to take up extremely seriously and they really need to move out of a fashion statement into some real solid action. It's not just about a risk table and then doing some heat sink. It's really understanding what could affect your business. It's also about extending it to a point where you say, not only how do I preserve my business, but what can I do to seize the opportunities which would be there, but if you don't really look closely at them, maybe you'll miss them.
Mr. Senapati, in a sense, you represent an industry which is cutting edge in terms of one major risk that confronts all companies, cybersecurity. So basically, what has the IT industry to teach corporate India in terms of cybersecurity in particular?
You know, first of all, India moving from a $2 trillion to a $10 trillion economy. And the kind of changes that you're seeing, whether it's geopolitical, economic, commodity prices, and the disruptive technology, whether it is cloud, whether it is analytics, whether it is cybersecurity or Internet of Things, all this is going to change the business model. We have already seen how taxis are being flying. We have already seen in the healthcare industry. We have seen how the goods and services are being sold and purchased. Laws are changing. GST, cross-border stuff, TPP is coming into play. So from that point of view, everybody is looking for employment in their own regions. Protectionism is coming into play. So I would say there are various interests at play, and the speed at which the changes are happening is fast. In that context, the maximum changes that one is seeing is in the technology area. So now wars are not being fought anymore on the borders with a gun here and there, but it is more fun through the technology. While we are talking here in terms of building technology, there are enough and large monies that is being spent on an organized basis to attack, because the wealth lies in intellectual property of the various organizations. So I think if I see over the last 5 years, the amount of investment that is going, amount of awareness that is being built on, when we start talking to the clients, the kind of due diligence they do on companies like ourselves, saying, are you dealing with these issues? Do you have a business continuity plan? Do you have a disaster recovery plan? What is the kind of a scenario do you see in terms of cyber attacks? I remember in an earlier meeting, there were a few of our CFOs, and somebody said, how many of you have experienced a cyber attack? 20% only put their hands up. 80 didn't. Then he said, how many of you realize that you don't know about it? Another 20. So theoretically, the balance 60 have already gone through an attack, but they're just unaware of, and even not acknowledging that they are unaware of, which is dangerous. But I'm sure if you take a vote now, that percentage would change. So the awareness is going to change. There is a lot more products that is being available in this area. Constant budgets are being allocated in this space. And for us, we are seeing the engagement in this area is very, very high.
Mr. Shankaraman, you're in an industry, infrastructure, where there are multiple risks, probably much more than the kind of risks Mr. Senapati speaks about. There is a social risk. Land acquisition is a big issue. And depending on government all the time for a whole host of approvals at various levels of government. So what would your message be in terms of what a company should be aware of, what boards should be aware of?
I think infrastructure is a very interesting space because you're building something to last 20, 30, 50 years. And we are going to go through several cycles. Risk is very dynamic. What possibly in the past people were doing was to look at this in a very static manner. Today, I think there is an appreciation that a lot of things could change over this 20, 30, 50 years. So what was perceived as a risk becomes an opportunity. What was an opportunity becomes a risk. So the ability to keep pace and be agile to the whole concept of risk, and to be able to find solutions as you go along, because there's not going to be a project where you're going to know everything that's going to play out through its phase. So I think from a boardroom level, there is a need for us to take it to ground level. And I think every operating manager who controls elements of the project will have to appreciate what the changing risk profile could mean for the project. So there is a internal awareness that needs to be created in such organizations where people appreciate that risk is part and parcel of their life. It's easy to run away from them, avoid them, but I think you will land up missing an opportunity and not playing the game. So I think ability to embrace risk and manage risk is going to be possibly the key if you're talking about infrastructure as a space.
But is it awareness that you encourage in your organization, or can it be broken into processes?
Actually, the processes is a fallout of the awareness. I think the minute you accept that there is to be dealt with, then the organizations go through what processes need to be put in place to deal with it. Because typically there are multiple people who deal with this. It's not one single individual. So when you deal in an environment where multiple calls are taken by different people in different geographies, then you have to resort back to processes. I think companies like us, we've had the advantage of dealing with large projects. So we've realized a little earlier than generally the lot about the importance of processes. But I definitely see chief risk officers being appointed more and more as compared to the past. It was used to be viewed as a staff function, a overhead. Today, it is becoming a source of competitive advantage. The learnings from one project become an input for the next project. So I think there is greater acceptance of the value creation this function can provide.
Well, let me come to the man who is, in a sense, an outsider, the corporate lawyer whom we have with us, Sandeep. What would you say are the new risks that companies face? Is it that India is becoming a very litigious country? From a legal standpoint, what would you want India to be aware of?
Before answering your question, I'd just like to divide risk into two aspects, in fact, which is discussed today. One is the positive side, which is strategic risk, really. How do you grow your company? How do you improve profits? And the other is the negative one. And obviously, in terms of mindshare, as soon as you say risk, everybody talks of the negatives. I mean, the most classic example of legal risk is what we saw with Satyam. Clearly, we've come a very long way from Satyam in terms of internal processes. And if you look at internal processes, you'd want to divide it into three parts. One is scope, second is probability, and third is magnitude. And you need to, for scope, you need to divide risk into what do you anticipate. Some are very obvious. For an oil company, the price of oil is very important. Some are much less visible, and there you need to take the probability and magnitude test. Legal is obviously one of those which has a huge impact in terms of both preventing problem in the future and also just a general strategic benefit in terms of how well you draft your contracts. So I think there's a very significant change over the past 7 or 8 years, I would say, compared to where we were in the mid-90s or even early 2000s.
In terms of
awareness, checks and balances, not too much of power residing in a particular person. Lot more external checks. People like him are in business, people like us are in business because of that. And I think it's having a significant impact already.
Well, Mrityunjay, since KPMG was the knowledge partner, what were the premises on which you started evaluating companies or studying companies?
So I think obviously the first was to define the categories as to what kind of companies do we look at. And then really going down and understanding, one, the risk management process as to what's the theory behind it in terms of the structures, the frameworks, the committees, and all of that, the process element that goes along with it. And the second aspect that we thought which would be very important, relevant, is the practicality of actually implementing the entire process within an organization. As to how does it impact the strategy, how does it impact the operations, what's the return that it gives back to the companies, and also very importantly, what's the ability that it gives an organization to actually go out and take risks. So because it's not just about mitigating or stopping somebody from doing anything. So these combine, and I think we went very sector specific to get insights as to what companies are doing, and even beyond what is just documented, but as to what are some of the best practices and what the management, the promoters are actually looking at as they go out and run their businesses.
Let me start with you, Mr. Shankar Raman. Anything interesting that you want to communicate in the that you found in the jury round? Any specific category that interested you?
Well, I think there were few risk-loaded categories. So what was interesting to me was to see how those risks are handled as a jury. There is also a new age companies that are coming into play, and they're going to be up with completely different kind of risks. They're not time tested. So the interesting part of the deliberation today was how we could seamlessly move from established risks and see the maturity of risk handling versus emerging risk and the nascency surrounding that. So I think it's quite a study in contrast.
Mr. Senapati, what the most hilarious thing or the most interesting thing that you found in the jury round?
First of all, I think when we started setting up a risk management team, enterprise risk, say about 8-9 years back, and when we tried to look at a lot of benchmarking with Indian companies and global companies, we found that outside of the financial services, the risk management, enterprise risk management processes are very, very low. But to my surprise, when I saw the documents that you all collated and KPIG presented, I was impressed with the kind of a development that I've seen, particularly 3 years before to today. So that is a good thing. I think some of the segments that sort of far scored better, whether it's an IT, telecom, auto, and there are so many others, and also some of the agri areas. I mean, I was really amazed with so much of sophistication that is there in terms of the crop side of the story. So I felt very exciting, and I hope that what is being articulated versus what is being in place implementation is very high. And like Akhil said, proof of the pudding is in eating. Making sure that there is a process whereby you do an inventarization of all the risks, put them to a map of high probability and high impact, and based on that come to a top 5, top 10 kind of risk, which is managed at a board, or which is monitored at a board level. I wouldn't say managed. Managed has to be at a ground level. And the kind of time that as an enterprise risk management or a top management people spend in educating people of the risk. It's like we talk about finance for non-finance. The moment I find all my organization people are financially savvy, look at the kind of a load on me. I can do much better work. So similarly, when everybody understands the risk that they deal with, because the de-risking can start at the bottom. So those are the things which I think the current generation, the new enterprises should be spending their time on. And mind you, investors are more and more giving higher weightage to this risk management. So you will give your multiplier in the P's, like Shankar Raman said. It is no more a cost. It is it feeds into itself in terms of generating opportunities.
Sandeep, anything shocked or surprised you in the process of the discussions?
Yeah, I think one category was very interesting, I thought, without giving away the results. I think the retail category was very interesting because you had the e-commerce companies and you had the bricks and mortar legacy companies. And they're the same category, but the kind of both the upsides and the downsides were so wildly different in terms of metrics, in terms of the categories of risk, in terms of how the future risk appetite for each is going to be. It was just quite challenging and interesting to see how to put both of these in the same bucket.
Mr. Gupta, you spoke about the need for a next generation award or the next category award. Can you elaborate on where do you see these awards evolving and where should we look for excellence?
Okay, before that you asked what was funny.
Yes.
So what I found funny was that during the discussions we talked, risk is obviously the biggest thing is how to preserve your revenues and grow your revenues. But the funny part was that there were some categories being discussed where there is no revenue model. So one was wondering what is the risk there. So that was a bit of a funny part. The other aspect which I felt was not funny and was serious and negatively serious was time and again when we talked about various categories, there were some big names missing who were not nominated. And when we talked to Mrityunjay, the general response was that many of them are not willing to talk about it because of secrecy and they don't. And to my mind, that is a very serious matter because for risk mitigation, the first and foremost thing, at least what I feel, is for a company to say, I want to be transparent. I want to be seen as to what I am doing, because once you do that, you also see that internally in a very transparent manner. Therefore, most of the companies, the problems arise when they do not see the problems and they just brush it under a carpet. So I think that is something which perhaps through these awards we should convey, that the biggest risk mitigation is to be transparent. Don't worry about that, this is secret, that's secret. Nothing is secret. Everybody knows what others are doing. But if you are transparent, then things will, naturally you'll be able to deal with the risk better. On the last one, I think jury had a very interesting discussion that while we are looking at what people are doing, what are the best practices being followed, I think India, with all the risks which face us, is in a unique position to actually set the best practices for the world. And there are some of the best practices which are being already done, which the world could follow. And that's why perhaps one of the things which we discussed was to look at a best stroke next practice award. So to encourage companies to go beyond what the world has been doing, I think we need to lead in the risk management area.
It's great to hear that India can set standards. In fact, that was one of the key takeaways. Thank you very much, Mr. Senapati, Mr. Gupta, Mr. Parekh, Mr. Shankaraman, and Mrityunjay for joining us in this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.